The sound of heavy gloves smashing into leather echoed across the boxing gym like distant thunder. Sweat, breath, and raw aggression filled the air, the kind of place where reputations were built. Through knockouts, not words. Then a voice cut through everything. Kung Fu is fake. The statement was loud, confident, public. Every fighter in the gym turned toward the center ring. A massive heavyweight boxer, undefeated, feared, and known for ending sparring sessions in seconds, stood staring at a smaller man across from him, Bruce Lee. A few fighters smirked. Others leaned against the ropes, curious. Some expected this to turn into entertainment. They were right, because less than 6 seconds after that sentence was spoken, the entire gym would fall completely silent. Not out of confusion, out of shock. Years later, the fighters who stood inside that gym that day would still describe that moment the same way. It wasn't just fast. It was final. The gym itself was not designed for spectators. It was one of the toughest professional boxing training centers in the city. A place where rising contenders and seasoned fighters came to sharpen power and endurance. Heavy bags swung constantly from thick steel chains. Speed bags rattled in rapid rhythm. The air smelled of leather, sweat, and liniment oil. Inside those walls, respect wasn't given through reputation alone. It was earned through punishment. Fighters here measured worth in rounds survived, and opponents dropped. The central ring stood slightly elevated under harsh overhead lights, its canvas marked by countless hours of sparring and hard contact. Around it, men with broken noses and taped wrists moved with quiet intensity, each one carrying the physical proof of their profession. This was boxer territory. Precision, power, direct violence. Anything that looked flashy or theatrical was usually dismissed quickly and brutally. So when word began spreading that a martial artist known more for speed than knockout power had stepped into their gym, most of the fighters watching assumed they were about to witness a very short lesson in reality. At the center of that gym stood the man everyone else adjusted around, Marcus Iron Bull Carter, the gym's most feared heavyweight, 6'4", 240 pounds of dense, conditioned power, a professional knockout artist whose reputation had spread far beyond the city. He wasn't just strong, he was efficient. In sparring sessions, he ended exchanges quickly. In amateur bouts, he ended them violently. And inside that gym, no one stepped into the ring with him without understanding exactly what they were risking. Heavy hands, explosive forward pressure, and a personality that enjoyed proving dominance publicly. Younger fighters admired him. Older fighters respected him. Most avoided challenging him unless required. Because Marcus Carter didn't just win exchanges. He humiliated opponents. He would corner them, break their rhythm, expose hesitation, then finish with a display that left no doubt. Who controlled the space? Inside that gym, his authority was unquestioned. No visiting fighter had ever walked in and taken that away from him. So when he heard whispers that a smaller martial artist had entered the building, a man known for speed rather than knockout power, he didn't feel threatened. He felt entertained. And to everyone watching nearby, there was only one logical outcome. If the two men interacted, the heavyweight champion would remind the visitor what real fighting looked like. Bruce Lee entered without announcement, no entourage, no attempt to draw attention. He stepped through the gym doors quietly, wearing a simple dark training outfit, his posture relaxed yet perfectly balanced. At first, only a few fighters near the entrance noticed him. Then whispers began spreading gradually across the room. That's him, Bruce Lee. I've seen him move. Some recognized the growing martial arts legend immediately, a man whose speed demonstrations and private training sessions had already built a quiet reputation among serious fighters. Others saw only a smaller figure, walking into a room filled with heavyweights. Compared to the thick-framed boxers around him, Bruce looked almost understated, lighter, calmer, unconcerned with appearances. He didn't try to dominate the room, didn't attempt to impress anyone. He simply observed. His eyes moved across the heavy bags, the sparring ring, the fighters moving through drills, measuring distance, reading energy, understanding the environment without needing to announce himself. A few boxers along the ropes exchanged faint smirks. One whispered something under his breath. Another shook his head slightly, amused by the contrast in size. But Bruce showed no reaction, no defensiveness, no eagerness to prove anything, just quiet presence. And for a few of the more experienced fighters watching closely, there was something unusual about that calm. Not hesitation, not uncertainty, control. The kind that doesn't demand attention, but inevitably receives it. Somewhere across the gym, the heavyweight champion noticed him fully for the first time, and in that moment, the atmosphere began to shift. Marcus Carter stepped down from the ring slowly, rolling his shoulders as he moved across the gym floor. Each step carried the relaxed confidence of a man who had never needed permission to dominate a space. The surrounding fighters sensed the direction immediately. Conversations faded. Training slowed. By the time he stopped a few feet in front of Bruce Lee, several men had already turned fully to watch. Marcus looked him up and down once. Not aggressively, almost amused. "So," he said, loud enough for nearby fighters to hear, "you're the kung fu guy everyone's been talking about." A faint smirk formed on his face. "I've seen that stuff," he continued, gesturing loosely with one wrapped hand. "All those fast hands, fancy moves." He shook his head slightly. "Looks good in movies." A few fighters near the heavy bags chuckled quietly. One leaned against the ropes, clearly entertained. Marcus stepped a little closer. "But this," he said, lightly tapping his glove against his chest, "is a boxing gym." He glanced around at the fighters watching. "Here, we deal in what works." Bruce remained still. Relaxed posture. Calm breathing, eyes steady. No defensive reaction. No attempt to interrupt. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "You ever been hit by a real heavyweight?" he asked. Silence. Then Bruce finally spoke. Voice calm, almost conversational. "Power is only useful," he said quietly, "when it can find its target." The simplicity of the response made a couple of experienced fighters glance at each other. But Marcus gave a short laugh. "Target?" he repeated. "You won't last long enough to worry about targets." He stepped back half a pace and spread his arms slightly, as if presenting the entire gym. "This isn't choreography," he said. "No second takes, no camera angles." He looked directly at Bruce. "Kung Fu might impress movie fans." Then came the line that shifted the atmosphere. "But in here, Kung Fu is fake." The nearby fighters reacted immediately, some smirking, others watching closely now, because the statement hadn't been casual. It was public, and it demanded a response. The energy inside the gym changed almost instantly. Heavy bags slowed. Gloves lowered. Footwork drills paused. Fighters who had been focused on their own training began drifting toward the open space between the two men. Not rushing, just gradually forming a loose circle of attention. Marcus noticed and didn't hide his satisfaction. He turned slightly so more of the gym could hear him. "I've seen a lot of styles come through here," he said, raising his voice just enough to carry. "Karate, judo, street fighters." He shrugged casually. "They all look good until someone starts throwing real punches." Several fighters nodded subtly. This was familiar territory for them. Boxing gyms respected results. Nothing else. Bruce stood exactly where he was, hands relaxed at his sides. "I didn't come here to prove anything," he said calmly. Marcus smirked. "That's usually what people say," he replied, "when they know what happens next." A few fighters exchanged glances. The tension was no longer subtle. This was becoming a moment. Marcus stepped closer again, closing the distance deliberately. "You walk into a boxing gym," he said. "People expect you to stand behind what you represent." Bruce met his gaze without aggression. "Understanding doesn't need to announce itself," he said. The calm answer only pushed Marcus further. He turned slightly, gesturing to the fighters around them. "You hear that?" he called out lightly. "Understanding." A couple of low chuckles spread through the circle. Then Marcus faced Bruce fully again. voice sharpening just enough to cut through the room. "If what you do is real." A pause. "Show us." Bruce remained silent. The pause stretched. And then, with a confident half-smile. That carried both challenge and certainty. Marcus delivered the line that locked every eye in the gym. "Kung Fu is fake." The words hung in the air. Heavy, public, unavoidable. Around them, the fighters stopped moving entirely now. Because the moment had reached a point where only two outcomes existed. Either the statement would stand, or it would be answered. For a moment, Bruce Lee didn't respond. The words lingered in the air, "Kung Fu is fake." Dozens of fighters stood watching, waiting for either tension to dissolve or ignite. Then Bruce took a slow breath and stepped forward. Just one step, not aggressive, not hesitant. Deliberate. "I don't fight to argue," he said quietly. "I only demonstrate when necessary." His voice was calm, not defensive, not emotional. Marcus Carter gave a small, confident smile. "That's perfect," the heavyweight replied. "Demonstrate." A few fighters leaned against the ropes, expecting what they had seen many times before. Someone from another style steps in. The heavyweight tests them. The difference becomes obvious. Quick, simple, educational. Marcus rolled his neck once and raised his gloves loosely. The relaxed posture of a man completely certain of how the next few seconds would unfold. He stepped into range without urgency. To him, this wasn't danger. It was routine. Bruce moved onto the open training floor opposite him, and something subtle changed. His shoulders aligned. His weight settled perfectly over the balls of his feet. His breathing slowed. The relaxed visitor who had entered the gym minutes earlier seemed to disappear. In his place stood someone, focused with quiet precision. Several experienced fighters at the edge of the circle felt it instantly, a shift in presence difficult to explain. Marcus stepped closer, confident, certain. He expected resistance, maybe speed, maybe creativity. What he did not expect was the level of control standing in front of him. For a brief second, Bruce's eyes locked onto a single point, the center line. Everything else went still. Marcus moved first. A fast, direct jab, the kind that had snapped heads back, and ended countless sparring exchanges inside that gym. It never reached its target. Before the punch fully extended, Bruce shifted. Not dramatically, not with wasted motion, just a precise adjustment of angle. That carried him slightly off the line of attack. To most watching, it looked like the punch simply passed through empty space. Then, everything accelerated. Bruce's lead hand intercepted, redirecting the momentum rather than blocking it. A sharp counter followed instantly, stopping less than an inch from the heavyweight's face. Not touching, just present. Marcus froze for half a heartbeat, long enough to register distance and timing. Then Bruce moved again. A rapid sequence of controlled strikes flowed toward openings that appeared and disappeared, faster than the eye could fully track. Each one stopped just short of impact. Jaw, ribs, throat. Precision without excess force. Speed without visible effort. Within seconds, Marcus found himself off balance, not knocked down violently, but completely unable to regain control of the exchange. Bruce stepped inside his range, redirected his center of gravity, and halted one final strike, less than an inch from his throat. Stillness. 6 seconds. That was all it took. Bruce lowered his hands calmly and stepped back. No celebration, no dramatic finish, just space. Around them, the entire gym fell silent. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The usual sounds of the gym, gloves hitting leather, footwork against canvas, coaches calling instructions, had completely disappeared. Marcus Carter remained where he stood, chest rising slowly, eyes fixed on the space just in front of him. Not hurt, not knocked out, but fully aware of what had just happened. Across from him, Bruce Lee stood calm and still, breathing steady, posture relaxed, as if the last 6 seconds had required no effort at all. The surrounding fighters looked between them in silence. They had seen speed before. They had seen power before. But what they had just witnessed was something different. Control, precision, inevitability. Marcus exhaled slowly and straightened his stance. For a brief moment, the heavyweight who dominated that gym looked directly at the smaller man in front of him. Then he gave a single nod. Not exaggerated, not forced. A quiet acknowledgement. From one fighter to another. No words followed. None were needed. Bruce returned the nod slightly, then turned and walked toward the exit with the same calm presence he had carried when he first stepped inside. No celebration, no speech, no attempt to claim attention, just quiet footsteps, fading across the gym floor. Behind him, the fighters remained still for a moment longer, processing what they had seen. Then gradually, training resumed. Gloves lifted, bags moved, voices returned. But something inside that gym had shifted. Years later, some of the fighters who were present that day would still describe the moment the same way. It wasn't the speed alone. It wasn't the technique. It was the silence afterward. Because for 6 seconds, inside a room built on knockout power and physical dominance, everyone had witnessed a different kind of mastery. The kind that doesn't need volume, doesn't need recognition, only presence. And from that day on, no one in that gym ever used the word fake. When speaking about Bruce Lee again,